All right, we are on to part 5 of the Mini Sales History Museum mini virtual tour. Today we are going to go through another shelf of books. This time it's the one over my left shoulder here. There's a couple of absolute classics in here, and actually the book that inspired my journey to dig into the history of sales. So let's go through them. All right, so let's start with this book right here. This book, so there's a guy named John Patterson that you may have heard me talk about. You've probably seen many people talk about him. He is quite literally the guy that founded so many of the things that we do in sales today, from him actually hiring individual salespeople, but giving them their own dedicated territories, providing full sales training to these individuals, teaching them in the NCR way. Patterson was the founder of the NCR Corporation, National Cash Register Corporation, in the 1880s. He was also the first one to really think through quotas and variable compensation. The first sales kickoff I was ever able to find was him in the 1890s. Back in early 1920s, so 1922-ish, he decided to sit down with a guy named Samuel Crothers to write his autobiography. Now, unfortunately, 2 days before they got together to start the project, John Patterson passed away. Sam Crothers then partnered with others in the NCR Corporation, family members of Patterson, and wrote the biography himself. This is an original 1923 copy of that. It is called John H. Patterson, Pioneer of Industrial Welfare. It's fantastic if you really want to understand a lot of the cores of the sales profession, but this guy's story is amazing too. It's a great way to do it. So that's book number 1. All right, so there's a bunch of other books on here worth noting. First of all, one of the things I find interesting is I have this book, Textbook of Salesmanship. It was written by a guy named Frederick A. Russell. It was originally written in 1924. This is a 1933 print of that book. What's funny, though, is that when you pass over to the right here, you'll see Textbook of Salesmanship. It's also written by Frederick A. Russell, but it was in 1955, so it is a full print that is 22 years later than the original one. This guy loved that title and continued to add on to it. Kind of cool having both versions of it. A couple other ones worth noting. This book here is called The International Library of Technology. It is a print from 1911. It is so beautiful. Like, again, it's got the leafing. The paper quality is unbelievable in here. It's just such a cool type of material. But when you think International Library of Technology, what does that have to do with sales? Well, the first section of the book is called The Profession of Salesmanship. And it is a fantastic summary of the history of sales actually leading up to that 1911, 1912 time period. So I love this book. The whole thing is a masterclass in thinking about business, but that first part is pretty amazing, and I just love the quality of this book. All right, as we keep going here, pushing to the front, I had talked about in a previous video. It's one of my pride and joy collectibles that I've got here from the 1890s. Volume 2 sits right here. It's from 1911. It goes on to dig in a little bit deeper. As you might recall, the pushing to the front, for me, looks so much like How to Win Friends and Influence People, but 30 to 40 years earlier than Carnegie's version. So I love that. Volume number 2 is pretty cool. This one here, Salesmanship and Business Efficiency, was written by a guy named James Samuel Knox in 1917. This is an original print of that. If you're ever looking for a book to kind of get started, I tend to find those on eBay quite a bit. I don't need more. Go buy them up if you want to start your collection. That's a good one because he writes really, really well too. Going along here, there's a couple of other books, The Technique of Selling. There's Salesmanship by Paul Ivy, who is a really, really good author. These are 1940s. A couple of ones here, though, that I want to point out. Let's go to this one for a moment. So this one might not seem that exciting. It's a 1957 print of a book called The 5 Great Rules of Selling by Percy Whiting. Percy originally wrote this book in 1947, so this print's about 10 years later. You can see all the tabs on it. Why is it important? Well, I actually found this book first. This was the first one that I happened to come across where I started leafing through it and I was like, well, that's weird. So much of what we talk about today is written right here in this book in 1957. Now, what Whiting does, though, is that he footnotes so many other books from earlier. So I started chasing them. And during COVID in April, May of 2020, I started digging all of these books out. I started buying them up on eBay. I started doing all of this research. I called the Library of Congress, made a friend there in getting digital versions of books from the 1800s. This is where it all started. So this book sits up there with pride, The Five Great Rules of Selling, which really kicked off my whole nerdery, combined with being locked up for COVID. I haven't been able to turn back. So that's the shelf for today. I hope you are enjoying these. You can check out the previous ones at T. Caponi on youtube.com. So youtube.com at T. Caponi. You can also go to toddcaponi.com. Click the drop down, hit video. I'm putting them all there. As always, I do post daily at Sales Historian on both Instagram and X if you're interested in quotes, pictures, tips, stuff from 100 years plus before. But again, hope you're enjoying this. Thanks for following along.